On today's show, Cara Gulati is going to share with us her Radiant Suns design. Before we join Cara, I'd like to share with you an idea of what to do when you have leftover blocks. On a previous show, we did this placemat. And if you have an extra one left, look what you can do. You can make it into a wall hanging. And let's talk about how we'll do that because it's got a trick to it. First of all, I wanted to fussy cut the cardinal inside a hexagon shape, but because of what I'm going to show you in a few minutes, we need to add interfacing and iron-on interfacing to stabilize this block. So I've also cut out a piece of iron-on interfacing. It has a sticky side. It's a good idea to use a pressing sheet. When you put iron-on interfacing on something, you can do one of two things. Either the interfacing is cut a little bit larger and you will damage your iron, or it's cut, you put it on the wrong way and it's onto your ironing board instead of your fabric. So I'm using a pressing sheet. I'll put it on the top and the bottom and just press. And that will give me a interfaced block that stabilizes. Now let's take a look at this particular piece. Here you see a cardinal. I've chosen fabrics that go around with it that will coordinate with this cardinal. But you know what else? What happens when Christmas or the winter season is over and you want to continue to use your piece? We can just take our hexagon and remove it. And in this case, we're ready for fall. And again, the colors still coordinate. So when you're going to do this, that's important. You have to coordinate with all the fabrics. And when we get tired of the fall leaves, we can have a piece that will go in, and this would be for summer. And again, the colors still of the borders still coordinate. Let's take a look here. And we'll just remove the next one. And here we have tulips, so we have a summer season. And you know, the interesting part was coordinating all of these fabrics, because at first I'll bet you thought they were Christmas. Well, we could go further and do another one. And we remove this, and now we have a springtime. So you can do it for any holiday. If you keep your fabrics in the borders neutral, then it might be a little bit easier, but we wanted to incorporate the fall colors, the reds and the greens and the whites. And so hopefully you'll have an interesting wall hanging that you can change according to the seasons. Just a simple sleeve on the back, and you can insert a hanger like this, and it's lots of fun. Now it's time to go in and join Cara, and she's going to show you how to assemble your fabrics, all the different fabrics you can use, and how to do some curve piecing that will just blow your mind away. So let's go in and take a look at how she does her Radiant Suns design. I'd like you to help me welcome today my guest. She's a new guest on the show, and this is Cara Gulati. Welcome, Cara.
Hi, Kaye. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to have such a great time today.
And you've designed something you call Radiant Suns. Let's take a look at the big quilt and tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, well, it's made up of one block. It comes in 3 colorways, and it's all curved seam piecing, no pins. The beauty of this is that if you're having a bad curved seam piecing day, you can cut all your blocks down and no one will know unless you let out the secret.
Okay, it sounds like one of those projects we really like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, how do we get started?
All right, well, the first thing we want to do is prepare our templates.
Okay.
And this is a picture of our block right here. It has 5 pieces, and the printed templates are here. And the first thing we want to do is peel our paper off. It's special decorator paper. It has printing on one side and not on the other. We'll set those aside, and once they're peeled off, we're going to lay these right here on top. It's very important that we have them all facing right side up.
Yeah, I would imagine. Otherwise, we'll get something strange,
Well,
right?
not a square, and we can cut that down too.
Okay.
It's all good. So what we'll do here is lay these up here. We'll write our numbers on them, our little grain line, and then I like to have my students write their name on it. I think this is very easy to do because if we turn it over, your name is upside down, you'll know that something's wrong.
That's a great idea because arrows wouldn't tell you that.
No, absolutely. And if
Okay.
you write top on it, it still looks like pot upside down.
It looks like this is for me.
Yes, it is. It's a
Okay.
gift. All right, so once those are prepared, we can set them aside and set this aside. And the next thing we'll talk about is picking our fabrics.
Oh, that's the fun part, but you know, it seems to be the terrifying part for a lot of people.
It can be, and I believe it's more intuitive than we all believe. Absolutely. What I did is I took a little square from the quilt that I made, and for each area of color, I laid it out so that you can see how it graduates. These are yellows, yellow-orange, orange, bright red, and a dark red. And this will make up the blocks that make up the sun. There's 24 of these.
Okay.
Okay? Then if we flip this up, these are the background blocks. This one goes from blue to blue-green, yellow-green, kind of a bright yellow-green, and a dark green.
So do you recommend your students that they actually do something like this and
Yes.
arrange the color?
I'm going to show you how we arrange the fabrics.
Okay.
That's the best part. This is the other background block from pink all the way to dark purple. And there's 12 of these and 12 of these and 24 of these.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Lots of fabric.
Lots of fabric. So here's my very favorite part of the class. When a student comes up with their giant stack of fabric and lays them out and said, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? So since we're looking at yellow to red, what I like to do is start to, divide them up. I like to put my reds separate from my oranges. See, we have lots of nice bright oranges
Yes.
here. Some zingers. Zingers are always good. Something that looks a little more orange, a little more red. And you just kind of feel it out as you go. See, I have all these nice oddly shaped pieces. You notice that our templates were oddly shaped. This is what happens to your fabric. It's another way of having Swiss cheese without the calories. So here's my nice bright reds, and see, I just kind of lay them out here. I need 5 piles of fabulous color.
Okay.
These are a little brighter. Kind of play with these some more. These seem a little darker. And I kind of move them around till I get just about what I want.
So it's nothing absolute. It's just what your eye sees.
And it's what you're feeling that day. You know, it's some days this might be orange and some days this might be red. It just depends on how you're feeling. And then can you see how these graduate?
Yeah.
Now this guy seems to stick out like a sore thumb. He looks very much like this group and not much like this group. So this is where he goes.
Okay.
So you just kind of use your eye and feel your way across here. And that's what you get. Now when you have your 5 piles, you'll pull out your plastic templates. And I just like to lay them right on top of the piles. I've arranged my colors. I don't have to think anymore. So there's my A.
Okay.
My B has disappeared. It's gone on a trip without us.
All right.
C, D, and E.
All right. And so, okay, so the lightest pile, is that the way you refer to it? Or
Right.
is
You
the
can
A?
look at the lightest. Yeah, we want to start our suns out with the yellow. And
Okay.
it swirls out and creates and goes all the way to a dark red. So we're looking at yellow, yellow, orange, orange, red, and dark red.
Okay.
Okay, so now that we don't have to think about color anymore,
Okay, if you
we've
say
made
so.
our decisions. Well, we've made our decisions, right? So
Yeah.
then I like to wrap up my piles and just get them out of the way. And if you just wrap them up in one fabric and leave your template on it, then you're done with that. You can come back to it later.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's do a little cutting demonstration with this C. I like to use a small rotary cutter and a large rotary cutter.
Okay.
Reason being is that the inside of this curve is very tight. The other thing I like to do is put masking tape on the bottom of these. I think that works out wonderful. That way if your masking tape is facing up, you also know it's upside down. So here's our piece and our small rotary cutter, and we want to come in and get right inside that corner there. I think that works out
okay.
wonderful. And you'll want to go a little bit beyond your edges And then here's this guy right here.
Of course, you could do it all with the small one, couldn't you?
You could. You know, the reason we like to be thrifty, right?
Right.
A small little cutter goes around many more times than a large cutter, so your blade wears out faster. So if you think of all 48 blocks times 5 pieces, you want the big one too.
All right.
So let's see if I can scoot in here. This piece right here, this straight edge is the top of the block. So I like to go in and make sure that I can see that point. So now we've cut the top of the block, and now what I like to do is pull my fabric away. That way I know I have all sharp edges, and I haven't removed my template in case I need to get an extra string.
Good idea.
Okay, then we'll pull this off, and we're ready to go. And we'll do this, since we have 5 pieces, and we need 24 blocks, we cut 24 of each pile of each piece. So no matter if I have 5 fabrics, or 12 fabrics, or whatever it is, I'd make sure I have 24 of those when I'm done.
24 of an assortment? No, or
Right.
of each fabric?
24 of an assortment. Whatever is in the pile, I'll have 24 of that particular
total.
shape.
So it could be good for a scrap quilt.
It could be fabulous for a scraps quilt. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So then when we're done with all of this, we can set it all aside. And this is the next fun part. We get to design our blocks. And you have to help me with this.
Okay.
Okay, so we
Just
can
want it opened up.
open this up. And we have 6 here as an example.
There we go.
There we go. Marvelous. You're much better at that than I am. So we'll have 6 of these, and these are the E pieces, the
Okay.
outside. Let's see.
Let me have a few and I'll
Here
see if
you
I can do it
go.
right.
Oh, you can always do it right. This is pretty fail-safe.
Okay.
There we go. And then the next piece are these. These are our D pieces, and the only thing you really want to keep in mind, but you don't want to think too hard about it, is that if these have a lot of texture and pattern, maybe you'll want to put it next to something that doesn't have too much texture and pattern.
Okay, like this has, this might be better up here.
It could be, yes,
Or maybe not.
or maybe not. It just depends. And it's always good to have a zinger or two. See this little guy? He's got lots of different colors in
yeah.
him, but he still blends very nicely with these bright reds, and he looks really good next to that one right there. So we'll get those on. And then these are our C's, and we kind of keep in mind the same thing.
Okay.
A lot of pattern, maybe next to something not so busy. But remember, don't
What do
think
you
too hard
Don't
about
think
it.
too hard. Okay, done thinking.
Yeah, if you think too hard, you'll probably find that you don't switch out very many of them. But the beauty of this is that you can switch them out if you
Okay.
want to.
All right.
And these are our B blocks.
Okay, I think I'm going to go this one here.
Isn't this cool?
Yeah, this is fun.
I think this is the best part of the whole class. Let's see.
Oh,
there
forgot
we go.
he did.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go. Now, see this block right here that has
Yeah.
this little motif?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the proper world, you're supposed to cut everything on grain, and
Right.
it helps all the blocks stay nice and flat. But in my world, sometimes there are different things that you just need to get in that piece, and you just have to turn it a little off
Okay,
grain.
like here, just so.
Yeah, or you're almost out of fabric and you need one more piece. Go for it. As long as
Okay.
you don't handle it a whole bunch, it isn't going to make a huge bit of difference in the long run. Especially because of our fail-safe, you can cut your block down rule.
Oh. Oh, I like that fabric. Here,
Isn't that
There
cool?
you go.
There we go.
Does that look okay?
So that's the deal. Now here comes an even cooler thing, which I thought I invented until one of my students told me, oh, that's old hat, is to get a magazine. And I pull each block off of the wall, and I put it in my magazine.
Oh, doesn't matter what magazine.
Doesn't matter.
It's just to
It's
keep
an
them.
excuse to go shopping at the bookstore. So you pull them all off the wall, that way they don't fall down. You can take it over to your sewing machine in the magazine, and that way the cat comes by, swishes its tail, no big deal. You've only got one block on the floor instead of all of them.
Great idea.
So you're ready to go. So then let's fold this up and scoot it out of the way.
Okay.
And the next thing I want to show you is how our block gets sewn together. This is what our block looks like with all these pieces, A, B, C, D, and E. These pieces right here have the top of the block built into them. So all the seams start on this edge, 2 of them end here, and 2 of them end here. So the tricky part about curved seam piecing is that you need an offset in the beginning. So now, to do my offset points, which is the way I want to sew this together, I want to take my C and lay my D on top, right sides together. And as I do this, I want to line up my seam allowances here. They'll only line up a little bit, but that's just fine. We don't need to worry about the rest right now. Now the whole point of this is we need to be sewing on top of both fabrics at the same time when we begin our seam. So I want to scoot this up here so that this is still lining up, but our offset is 1/4 of an inch, which means our needle will start right there on both fabrics at the same time.
Right where they overlap.
Right where they overlap. Then once we get it under the machine and we've sewn a little bit, let me turn this around here, we'll stop and we'll realign these edges as we go around, doing our best not to stretch. And as we get around to the end here, we'll stop maybe about right here, maybe about 1/4 of the way before the end. And we'll line up our seam allowances again. But then we have this little problem here. So we want to scoot this up again. And if we haven't stretched, it's going to fit perfectly. We'll just lay this on top. It'll go exactly where it's supposed to go because it's behaving. And we'll sew right off the edge here. And this will fold right open. And then we'll get a seam that looks like this, where we have our little point hanging down here. And see, here's our offset on this side. It just points out a little 1/4 of an inch. And then we go to the top here, and we have the same thing going on where it sticks out just 1/4 of an inch.
And it fits perfectly.
It fits beautifully. And then the last thing I need to show you is the pressing. We like to press everything towards the large piece. It presses flat that way. Some people prefer to do it the opposite way. It's quilt's forgiving. You can do whatever you want, but this is my way, and I like it.
This works best for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay.
So at this point, why don't we go to the sewing machine, and I'll show you how to do it.
Okay. Sounds like a good idea. Okay, it looks like we're ready to sew. How have you got your machine set up?
Well, we have a straight stitch, and we want it to stop needle down as we go, which is a wonderful thing for curves, so we're going to stop and start quite a bit.
Okay.
So what we want to do first is pull our block out from our first page.
Oh, this is such a great idea, putting these in magazines.
Isn't that cool?
I never thought of that.
So now I've sewn these first 2 seams because I think it'll be easier to show you these bigger seams. I want you to see the offset as I go. So notice here, remember we talked about this is the top of the block, this is the top of the block, and this is the top of the block. So we need to be aware of that when we get to the end of our seam.
Okay, so our next seam is going to be these 2.
Right.
We're working from the small out.
From the small out.
Okay.
I like to lay my block just like this and work my way from small to large.
Okay, let me get this piece out of your way then.
Thank you. So we scoot this down here. I really like to have an extension table because then I can see exactly what I'm doing and I can slide it right under the sewing machine foot, which I think is very helpful. It's much easier than doing something in the air because by the time you get it down, it's somewhere different.
Right.
Okay, so we have right sides together. And notice how we're lining up our seam allowance edges again. And then we scoot this up to get our little offset seam. And it's about 1/4 of an inch, okay? Close counts. Get it underneath here. Sew a few stitches, and then you'll stop needle down, you'll look underneath, and you'll line this up, and it'll just bend right around the edge here. The key is not to stretch it. It really actually does fit together.
Okay.
It takes my students about 2 blocks, sometimes 3, to actually believe me. And we just set
So
it
you're
on
doing
here.
short segments.
Just little segments. These seams right here, you'll have to stop and start a lot more often.
Because they're so much shorter.
Because they're shorter and they're tighter. These curves are a little more gentle, which works out fabulous. And then something else you'll notice here are these pleats I get on the side.
Yeah.
I call those fake pleats. They hardly ever turn into the real deal.
Okay.
What happens is you have a lot of extra fabric over here
Yes.
and it has to go somewhere. So the sewing machine is helping you out by pressing it down with the presser foot and creating this pleat that you have to iron out later. It's just a small favor. Okay, now we're getting close to the end. Here's our seam. There's the top of our block. So we scoot this under here, line those seam allowances up, and then scoot this forward just like that. So we have our little offset that we talked about. I like to put my finger right on top, lay this out flat, and see how this just scoots right on top of it. It just lays perfect. And then we'll just let the machine feed it all the way to the end and off the edge. And then we use our little cutter here, and here's our offset, just like we talked about.
Okay.
And then it opens just like this.
And you're right, the pleats they're not there.
They just disappear. Isn't
Let's
that wonderful?
take a look at right here. It looks like, oh, I see, it's not sewn in. It's just
No.
beyond the seam line.
Yep. The presser foot almost acts like a little iron without heat, but it has all that pressure on it, so it makes you believe that you've done something wrong when in fact you're a genius and you've done nothing wrong. Okay, so we need our last piece, which there we go. This piece sits right here. This one's a little trickier, but not too much. The top of this pink piece right here, here's our straight edge.
Okay.
And our seam actually ends about right here. The way you tell is when you've cut it, you've cut straight across here.
Right.
You've come in at an angle. Generally, you'll be able to see the point, but if you can't, you start looking for a little fraying, and you'll know that the end of your seam is about right there.
Right, about there. I can see
Yeah.
it because this is straight, then the curve starts. Is that right?
Right. And remember, close counts because you can always cut them down. So if you're having a bad curve seam piecing day, you just cut them all down and they'll be beautiful. Okay, so right sides together. Remember our seam allowance here. Line up your seam allowance. Scoot this up just a little bit. There's our offset. Our colors are close on this one, so it's a little harder to see. Scoot this underneath. And this seam is really gentle, so it actually lines up for a long way, and it's a lot faster to sew this one.
So the longer the curve seam, the easier it is to do. Is that right?
If it's gentle, if it's
it's
long
a gentler
and tight,
curve.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, see, and it just lines up beautifully. Okay, now this one we're getting near the end. And again, I like to shove this forward, line up our seam allowances, and this one's at kind of an odd angle, so we don't always get exactly a 1/4 of an inch. I don't worry too much about that.
Okay,
I
if
just
you don't
get it
worry,
close.
I don't worry.
I get it close, and there we go. It lays right down, and away we go. And what we want to do is have our foot follow this top piece off into space.
Oh,
Okay?
I see.
And it slipped a little bit, but that's okay. You can see we kind of ended up over here. Ideally, in the real world, we'd want to be right in the middle there, but we're awfully
Okay.
close.
All right.
And then this will just fold over this way. And then when we press it, we'll end up with all of our seam allowances pressed towards this large piece, just like that.
Okay, what size, assuming you don't have to trim anything off, what size will your blocks be?
In a perfect world, your
Right.
block will be 10.5 inches.
Okay.
In my world, I usually cut it down to around 10 1/4, 10 inches. It just
Okay.
depends on how fast I've sewn them and how fast I need my quilt.
Okay.
So I don't worry too much about that.
All right.
Okay, so then these are our blocks, and they're all the same, and you don't worry about these little guys up here. That's just what you get with curved piecing. It's like gift with purchase.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
and then I want to talk to you a little bit about how I like to quilt these. I like to do free motion quilting with a darning foot, which is wonderful. And I like to use very bright threads. Neon colors are my favorite.
Oh,
these are
these are
fabulous, aren't they? Now you look at it on the spool and it's a really scary thing because you think, oh my gosh, all that color doesn't have batteries. It's going to make my quilt look bad because the thread looks so good. But it's not true. Every time you get thread off the spool, it looks completely different because there's not as much of it and it's going in and out. So the light reflects differently, giving it a nice texture.
Now this looks like a variegated thread
This
here.
is a variegated thread here, this wonderful one right here. It's actually a combination of these two colors and a couple of others. And what I do when I quilt the suns, I like to do flames. So I do my little swirl in the center here, and then flames are very easy. You zip out here with a wavy line, make some kind of point, come back, make another wavy line, make a point, and you just continue all the way around till you fill your surface.
How much practice does this take your students? Now I know you've done it enough, so it's pretty easy.
It's always scary the first time, and not too much. A little bit, maybe get a few practice squares out. I think the best practice for free motion quilting is putting a real quilt under the sewing machine and going for it. It's never as bad as you think it is. When you wake up the next day and it's not this far from your face, it always looks much better than you thought.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the quilt you brought behind me. That one is a scrap quilt, you told me.
Right, that one has probably a different fabric for every single template piece.
Okay.
Darn close to it.
Okay, and
This petite quilt is an example of using not very many fabrics. So our green blocks and our purple blocks have the same fabrics repeated over and over again. And our sun blocks, there's two different sets. So there's two yellows, two yellow oranges all the way out to the outside. And this makes a little flatter look rather than a whole bunch of fabrics, but I still think it's beautiful because those batiks just glow.
they sure do. Well, I want to thank you so much, Cara. I've really enjoyed seeing the way you work with this, so I know my viewers have too.
Thank you for having me.
And be sure and join me on my next show when I'll bring you some more quilting ideas.
For information on today's main demonstration, call 1-800-248-KAYE. That's 1-800-248-5293. Or write to us at Kaye's Quilting Friends, Post Office Box 456, West Branch, Michigan 48661. Please remember to specify the program number. Kaye's Quilting Friends is brought to you in part by Janome America, Brandy's, Sulky of America, and Oddlight Technology. Our thanks for joining us for this edition of Kaye's Quilting Friends. We hope the ideas shared with you in this program will make your quilting more enjoyable. Please join us again on the next Kaye's Quilting Friends.